Have you ever wondered what keeps people going, even in the worst times? What gives life purpose, even when everything seems lost? Today, we are diving into one of the most powerful books ever written, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor E. Frankl. This book is not just about psychology. It's about real-life struggles, survival, and the incredible power of the human mind. Viktor Frankl was a Holocaust survivor, and through his experiences in Nazi concentration camps, he discovered something profound. Those who had a reason to live, a meaning in life, were more likely to survive unimaginable hardships. But what does meaning really mean? And how can we find it in our own lives? Imagine being taken away from your home, separated from your family, and sent to a place where survival is almost impossible. That was the reality for Viktor Frankl. During World War II, he was imprisoned in Nazi concentration camps, where millions of people suffered and died. Frankl lost his parents, his brother, and his wife in these camps. He had nothing left. No freedom, no possessions, no certainty about tomorrow. But in the middle of this suffering, he observed something powerful. The people who held on to a sense of purpose, even in such horror, had a higher chance of survival. Some found meaning in the hope of seeing their loved ones again. Others found meaning in their work, their faith, or simply the idea of helping others. Frankl realized that meaning is not given to us. We must find it for ourselves. This idea became the foundation of logotherapy, a type of therapy that focuses on helping people discover their purpose in life. And this brings us to an important question. How can we find meaning in our own lives, even in difficult times? That's what we'll explore in today. Viktor Frankl's experiences in the concentration camps were terrifying. Every day, prisoners faced hunger, cold, exhaustion, and the constant threat of death. They were treated as if they had no value, no identity, and no future. Many lost hope, but Frankl noticed something important. Some prisoners, despite all the suffering, managed to hold on. They found a reason to keep going. Frankl himself was one of them. He was a doctor, a psychiatrist, and even in the camp he kept observing people. He asked himself, why do some people survive while others give up? It wasn't about physical strength. Some strong men collapsed while some weak prisoners endured. What made the difference? He realized it was about having a reason to live. If a prisoner had something to look forward to, something that gave them meaning, they could endure almost anything. One man believed his wife was waiting for him. Another had a book to finish, an important idea to share with the world. Frankl himself had a purpose too. He wanted to survive so he could share what he was learning, so he could help others understand the power of meaning. One of the hardest moments for the prisoners was losing everything they once had. They were stripped of their homes, their families, their jobs, their names. Everything that gave them identity was taken away. But Frankl discovered that even when everything is gone, one thing remains: the power to choose how we respond. He wrote about a day when he was forced to march for miles in freezing weather, wearing thin clothes, weak from hunger. A man next to him whispered, "If our wives could see us now." They began imagining their wives, picturing their faces, remembering their voices. In that moment, Frankl felt something strange. He was still suffering, but he realized that no one could take away his thoughts, his inner world. This was a key lesson. Even in the worst conditions, we have the power to choose our thoughts. We can choose to focus on meaning, on love, on hope. The Nazis could control his body, but they couldn't control his mind. Frankl also saw that suffering itself could have meaning. When a person had no way to escape their pain, they could still give it purpose. He met a man who had lost everything. His family, his home, his health. The man wanted to die, but Frankl helped him see that his suffering could be meaningful. He could endure it with dignity. He could show others that even in the worst times, a human being can stay strong inside. This was the heart of Frankl's discovery. Life is not about avoiding suffering. It's about finding meaning in it. If we know why we are suffering, we can bear almost anything. Frankl believed that meaning is not something we wait to find. It is something we create. In the concentration camps, people had no freedom, no possessions, and no certainty about the future. But even in that terrible place, they could still find meaning in small ways. Some prisoners shared their last piece of bread with others. Some helped the weak, even when they were struggling themselves. Some stayed kind, even when surrounded by cruelty. These people showed that meaning is not about what happens to us, but about how we respond. Frankl saw that there were three main ways people could find meaning in life. The first way is through work or a task. If a person feels they have something important to do, they can endure great hardship. He gave the example of a scientist who had a book to complete. Even in the camp, he held on to life because he believed his work mattered. The second way is through love. Love gives life purpose, even in suffering. Frankl often thought about his wife. He did not know if she was still alive, but in his mind, she was with him. He spoke to her in his thoughts, imagined her face, remembered her voice. This love gave him strength. It reminded him that even in darkness, something beautiful still existed. The third way is through suffering itself. If suffering is unavoidable, we can choose to give it meaning. Frankl met a man who was completely broken. He had lost his family, his home, his health. The man wanted to die. But Frankl helped him see that his suffering could still have purpose. He could bear it with dignity. He could show others that even in pain, a person can still be strong inside. One of the most powerful ideas in Frankl's book is that no one can take away our freedom to choose our attitude. We cannot always control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond. Frankl called this the last of human freedoms. The ability to decide how we will face any situation. He told the story of a young woman who was dying in the camp. She had nothing left, but she said she was not unhappy. She pointed to a tree outside her window. She said the tree was her friend. She talked to it. She saw beauty in it. Even in her final days, she chose to focus on something good. Frankl's message is clear. Meaning is not about comfort, success, or avoiding pain. It is about finding something bigger than ourselves, something that keeps us going, no matter what happens. Frankl's time in the concentration camps taught him that human beings are capable of incredible strength. But this strength does not come from physical power. It comes from the mind. The body can be weak, tired, and in pain. But if the mind holds on to a sense of purpose, a person can endure almost anything. He saw that the prisoners who had meaning in their lives were more likely to survive. But what about those who lost their sense of purpose? Frankl noticed that when prisoners lost hope, their bodies followed. Some would lie down and refuse to get up, even if a guard was beating them. Others would stop eating even when food was available. Once a person lost the will to live, no medicine or extra food could save them. It was not the hunger or cold that killed them first. It was the loss of meaning. Frankl told the story of a man who was convinced that they would be freed by Christmas. He held on to this hope and it gave him strength. But when Christmas came and nothing changed, he lost all hope. Within a few days he became sick and died. His body had still been strong enough to survive, but his mind had given up. This shows how powerful our beliefs can be. When a person believes they have no future, their body responds to that belief. But when they believe that their life has meaning, even suffering becomes bearable. This is why Frankl said that the most important question in life is not, what do I expect from life? But, what does life expect from me? Many people think that meaning comes from what life gives them, happiness, success, love. But Frankl discovered that meaning comes from what we give to life. Even in the worst situations, we can still give something. We can choose how we react. We can choose to act with dignity. We can choose to help others. And in making these choices, we create meaning. He believed that every moment of life asks us a question. When we wake up in the morning, life is asking us, what will you do today? When we face suffering, life is asking, how will you handle this? Even in our final moments, life is still asking us, how will you face death? If we see life this way, we stop waiting for meaning to come to us. Instead, we start looking for ways to bring meaning to each moment. Frankl gave an example of a doctor who came to him for help. This man had lost his wife, and he could not find a reason to live without her. Frankl did not tell him to forget his pain or move on quickly. Instead, he asked the doctor a question. If you had died first, how would your wife have felt? The man answered that she would have suffered terribly. Then Frankl said, by outliving her, you have saved her from that suffering. Your pain has meaning because you have taken on the grief that she would have had. The doctor thought about this and realized that his suffering had a purpose. He could bear it with dignity, knowing that it was part of his love for his wife. This is one of the most powerful ideas in Frankl's book. Suffering itself can be meaningful if we find a reason for it. If we face hardship without purpose, it feels unbearable. But if we can see that our suffering is part of something greater, we can endure it with strength. Frankl believed that suffering is not necessary for meaning. If we can avoid pain, we should. But when suffering is unavoidable, we must ask ourselves, what can I learn from this? How can I use this experience to grow? In this way, even life's hardest moments can become a path to something greater. Frankl's experiences in the concentration camps led him to develop a new form of therapy, which he called logotherapy. Unlike other forms of psychotherapy, which focus on past experiences or emotional problems. Logotherapy is based on one central idea. The search for meaning is the most powerful force in human life. Many psychological theories suggest that people are driven by the need for pleasure or the desire for power. Sigmund Freud believed that human behavior is motivated by the pursuit of pleasure, while Alfred Adler argued that people are mainly driven by a desire to overcome feelings of inferiority and gain power. But Frankl saw something different. Through his time in the concentration camps, he observed that people could endure extreme suffering if they had a reason to live. He realized that the deepest human need is not pleasure or power. It is meaning. According to Frankl, suffering is not what destroys people. What truly breaks them is the feeling that their suffering has no purpose. When people lose meaning, they lose the will to live. But if they can find meaning, even in pain, they can survive almost anything. This idea became the foundation of logotherapy. In logotherapy, the therapist does not tell people what their meaning in life should be. Instead, the therapist helps them discover it for themselves. Frankl believed that meaning is different for every person and for every moment. What gives one person meaning may not be meaningful to someone else. And what gave a person meaning yesterday might not be the same today. Life constantly asks us to find new meaning, and it is our responsibility to answer. Frankl explained that there are three main ways to find meaning in life. The first way is through work or achievement, creating something valuable, contributing to society, or doing something meaningful with our skills. The second way is through love, deep connections with other people, caring for others, and experiencing love in all its forms. The third way is through suffering. When we can no longer change our situation, we must change ourselves. By finding a purpose in suffering, we can transform pain into growth. One of the most powerful techniques in logotherapy is called paradoxical intention. This technique helps people overcome their fears by making them face those fears in a new way. For example, Frankl worked with a man who suffered from extreme shyness and a fear of sweating in public. Whenever the man was around others, he became nervous about sweating, and the more he worried, the more he actually started sweating. Instead of trying to stop him from sweating, Frankl told him to do the opposite. He should try to sweat as much as possible. The next time he was in public, he said to himself, "I will show everyone how much I can sweat." The moment he stopped fearing it, the problem disappeared. This shows one of the key ideas of logotherapy. We often make our suffering worse by focusing on it too much. When we try to avoid pain or fear, we give it more power. But when we accept it and give it meaning, we take control. Another technique in logotherapy is dereflection. Many people become anxious or depressed because they are too focused on themselves. They constantly think about their own problems, fears, and failures. But logotherapy teaches that the best way to overcome this is to focus on others. When we shift our attention to helping someone else, we stop obsessing over our own struggles, and our suffering becomes lighter. Frankl believed that true healing comes when we turn our focus outward, when we stop asking, "What do I want from life?" and start asking, "What does life want from me?" He saw that the happiest and most fulfilled people are those who serve something greater than themselves. His message is clear. Life is asking us a question every day, and it is up to us to find the answer. Whether we are facing joy or suffering, love or loss, we always have the power to choose our response. And in that choice we find meaning. Frankl believed that meaning is not something that exists outside of us, waiting to be discovered. It is something that we create through our actions, our choices, and our attitude toward life. He often compared life to a chess game. Just as there is no single best move in chess, there is no single meaning in life that applies to everyone. The right move depends on the situation, just as meaning depends on the person and their circumstances. Many people struggle with feelings of emptiness. They wake up every day and feel that something is missing, even if they have everything they need. This feeling of emptiness is what Frankl called the existential vacuum. It is a state of boredom, frustration, and lack of purpose. He observed that many people today suffer from this problem, even when they are not facing great suffering. They have food, money, and comfort, but they feel lost. Frankl explained that the existential vacuum happens when people do not have clear goals or responsibilities. In the past, people's lives were shaped by traditions, religion, or social roles. These things gave people a sense of purpose. But in the modern world, many of these traditional sources of meaning have disappeared. People have more freedom than ever before, but they do not know what to do with it. One of the biggest signs of the existential vacuum is boredom. When people do not have a purpose, they seek distractions. They try to fill the emptiness with entertainment, material things, or temporary pleasures. They spend hours scrolling through their phones, watching endless TV shows, or constantly searching for new experiences. But no matter how much they consume, the emptiness remains. Frankl noticed that many psychological problems like depression, addiction, and aggression come from this lack of meaning. People who feel empty try to escape from their feelings through alcohol, drugs, or risky behavior. Some become aggressive and lash out at others because they feel lost inside. Others fall into deep sadness because they believe their lives have no purpose. But Frankl believed that the cure for the existential vacuum is not pleasure, power, or distraction. The only real solution is finding a sense of meaning. When people have a reason to wake up in the morning, they do not feel empty. When they believe that their actions matter, they stop looking for constant entertainment. He saw that meaning comes from responsibility. People feel fulfilled when they take on important roles, when they care for their families, contribute to their communities, or work towards something bigger than themselves. Meaning is not found in comfort, but in challenge. Frankl told the story of a man who came to him with severe depression. This man had lost his job, and he felt that his life was meaningless. He had no motivation to get out of bed, and he had even considered ending his life. Instead of trying to cheer him up, Frankl asked him a simple question. "Is there anyone in your life who needs you?" The man thought for a moment and then said, "Yes, my daughter. She depends on me." At that moment, something changed. He realized that his life still had purpose. Even though he had lost his job, he was still important. He had a role to play. He had a reason to keep going. This is one of the key ideas in Frankl's work. We do not need to search for meaning in distant places or grand achievements. Sometimes it is right in front of us, in the people who need us, in the small acts of kindness we can offer, in the responsibilities we choose to carry. Many people think that happiness comes from doing whatever they want, but Frankl argued that true fulfillment comes from serving something greater than ourselves. It could be a person, a cause, a dream, or even a difficult task. When we dedicate ourselves to something meaningful, we stop feeling empty. Another example comes from a woman who lost her husband after many years of marriage. She was grieving deeply and felt that life had no meaning without him. She told Frankl, "I have no reason to go on living." Frankl asked her, "What if it had been the other way around? What if you had died first, and your husband had to suffer without you?" The woman thought about it and said, "That would have been terrible for him." Frankl replied, "Then your suffering has meaning. By outliving him, you have saved him from this pain. You have taken on the suffering that he would have felt." For the first time, she saw her grief differently. She realized that her pain was not meaningless. It was an act of love. Frankl's message is clear. Life is not about avoiding suffering, but about finding meaning in everything, even pain. The moment we stop asking, "What can I get from life?" and start asking, "What can I give to life?" everything changes. Frankl believed that meaning is not something we wait for. It is something we create. Even in the worst situations, we have the power to choose how we respond. He saw that people in the concentration camps who found meaning in their suffering were more likely to survive. This was not because they were physically stronger, but because they had a reason to live. He told the story of a man who came to him feeling completely hopeless. This man had lost his wife, and he could not imagine a life without her. He told Frankl, "There is nothing left for me. I do not want to go on." Instead of giving him comforting words, Frankl asked a question. "What would have happened if you had died first and your wife was left behind?" The man thought about it. He realized that his wife would have suffered terribly without him. She would have felt the same unbearable pain he was feeling now. Frankl then said, "By outliving her, you have spared her that suffering. Your pain now has meaning. You are carrying the burden that she would have had to bear." The man did not suddenly become happy, but his grief changed. It was no longer just an empty loss. It was a sacrifice of love. His suffering had meaning, and that gave him the strength to go on. Frankl discovered that when people find meaning in their struggles, they can endure almost anything. He often repeated the words of Friedrich Nietzsche, "He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow." In other words, when we have a reason to live, we can get through even the most difficult situations. He saw this truth again and again in the camps. Some prisoners had lost all hope. They believed their suffering was pointless, and they gave up. They stopped eating. They lay down in their beds and refused to move. In a few days they were gone. But others, even in the same terrible conditions, found something to hold on to. Some held on to their faith. Some dreamed of seeing their loved ones again. Some wanted to finish a piece of work they had started before the war. These people had a reason to keep going. and that made all the difference. One of the most powerful things Frankl learned was that no one can take away our freedom to choose our attitude. In the camps, the Nazis controlled everything: food, clothing, work, even life and death. But there was one thing they could not control: the way prisoners responded to their suffering. Frankl saw men who gave away their last piece of bread to help someone weaker. He saw prisoners who comforted others, even when they were starving themselves. These people proved that even in the worst conditions, we still have the power to choose kindness, dignity, and love. This is the heart of Frankl's message. We may not be able to control what happens to us, but we can always control how we respond. He gave an example of a man who came to him, feeling trapped in his life. He hated his job. He felt stuck in his routine. He saw no future. He believed he had no freedom. Frankl told him, "You are free." The man was confused. How could he be free? He had responsibilities. He had bills to pay. Frankl explained, "You may not be free to leave your job today, but you are free to choose how you see it. You are free to change your attitude. You are free to find meaning in it." The man had never thought about it that way. He realized that he was not just a worker doing a boring job. He was providing for his family. He was creating something useful. His work had meaning, it just took a new perspective to see it. Frankl believed that when we stop seeing ourselves as victims of circumstances and start taking responsibility for our attitude, everything changes. This is where logotherapy becomes different from other types of therapy. Many therapies focus on past trauma, childhood problems, or deep emotions, but Frankl's method is different. He does not ask, "What happened to you?" Instead, he asks, "What meaning can you find in this?" Logotherapy does not focus on the past. It focuses on the future. It asks, "What is your purpose? What are you living for?" Frankl knew that not all suffering can be avoided. Life will always have pain, loss, and hardship, but he also knew that pain does not have to destroy us. When we find a reason for our suffering, we can turn it into something powerful. He once met a doctor who had lost his young son. The man was broken by grief. He told Frankl that nothing could ever replace his child, and he did not know how to go on living. Frankl did not try to take away his pain. Instead, he asked, "If your son had lived, what would you have wanted for him?" The man replied, "I would have wanted him to live a happy and meaningful life." Frankl said, "Then that is what you must do. If you cannot bring him back, honor his life by living in a way that would have made him proud." At that moment, the man's suffering changed. It did not disappear, but it became meaningful. He could now see his pain as something that connected him to his son. Instead of being trapped in grief, he found a way to move forward. Frankl's message is not about avoiding suffering. It is about transforming it. When we find a purpose greater than our pain, we become stronger than we ever imagined. Frankl's ideas were not just theories. They were lessons he had lived. He had seen how meaning gave people the strength to survive even in the worst conditions. But meaning was not something that simply appeared. It had to be discovered. It had to be created. One of the most important lessons he taught was that meaning is personal. No two people will find meaning in the same way. Some find it in their work. Others find it in their relationships. Some find it in their faith. There is no single right answer, but there is always an answer. He believed that life is always asking us a question, and it is our responsibility to answer it. That question is, what will you do with this moment? This idea is powerful because it puts responsibility in our hands. It means that even when life is unfair, even when suffering is unavoidable, we still have the power to decide what it means. We are not just victims of fate. We are the creators of our own meaning. Frankl often talked about the different ways people find meaning. The first way is through work. By doing something important, creating something valuable, or contributing to the world in some way. Many people find purpose in their careers, in their skills, or in their ability to help others through their work. The second way is through love and relationships, by connecting deeply with other people. This can be love for a partner, for family, for friends, or even for humanity as a whole. When we love someone, we find meaning in caring for them, in being there for them, and in making their lives better. The third way is through suffering, by turning pain into something meaningful. This is the most difficult but also the most powerful. It is about taking our struggles and using them to grow, to help others, or to understand life more deeply. One of Frankl's patients was a man who had lost everything. He had no family left, no job, no hope. He told Frankl that life had no meaning anymore. Frankl asked him, "Is there anyone who still needs you?" The man thought for a long time. Finally, he said, "Yes. My old mother is still alive. She has no one else. I take care of her." That was enough. His life still had meaning. Even in his suffering, there was a reason to go on. He was needed. Frankl believed that many people feel lost because they have not yet found their unique purpose. When people say, "My life feels empty," it is often because they are waiting for meaning to come to them, but meaning does not come by itself. It is something we must actively create. One common mistake people make is thinking that meaning has to be something big or extraordinary. They believe that unless they do something amazing, their life has no value. But Frankl taught that meaning is found in small things too. A mother taking care of her child, a teacher helping a student understand a lesson, a worker doing their job well, a friend being there when someone needs them. All of these things create meaning. He also warned that people who do not find meaning often try to fill the emptiness with things that do not truly satisfy them. Some chase after money, fame, or pleasure, hoping that these things will give them purpose. But in the end, they still feel lost. That is because meaning cannot be bought. It must be discovered within ourselves. Frankl saw that many modern people suffer not from physical hunger, but from spiritual hunger. They have everything they need to survive: food, shelter, comfort, but they still feel empty inside. He called this the existential vacuum, a feeling of emptiness, boredom, and a lack of purpose. This vacuum is dangerous because when people do not know their purpose, they become easy to manipulate. They follow whatever seems exciting in the moment. They become addicted to distractions. They look for happiness in things that do not truly fulfill them. Frankl believed that the best way to overcome this emptiness is to focus on something bigger than ourselves. Instead of asking, "What can I get from life?" we should ask, "What can I give to life?" A person who lives only for themselves will always feel empty. But a person who lives for something greater, a cause, a mission, a loved one, will always have a reason to wake up in the morning. Frankl often said that true happiness is not something we should chase. It is something that happens naturally when we are living with purpose. When we focus on meaning, happiness follows. But if we only focus on happiness, we may never find it. He compared it to a butterfly. If you try to catch a butterfly, it always flies away. But if you sit still and focus on something meaningful, the butterfly may come and land on your shoulder. This is the secret of a meaningful life. It is not about waiting for the perfect moment or the perfect job or the perfect person. It is about finding purpose in whatever moment you are in, right now. Frankl's ideas about meaning were not just for those in extreme situations like the concentration camps. He believed that everyone, no matter their circumstances, could apply these lessons in daily life. He saw that many people in modern society struggled with a sense of emptiness. They had freedom, comfort, and opportunities, yet they often felt lost. He called this the existential vacuum, a state where people feel that life has no purpose. This vacuum is dangerous because when people do not have meaning, they become restless. They may try to fill the emptiness with distractions like entertainment, social media, or temporary pleasures. Some chase after wealth, thinking that money will give them purpose. Others seek fame or recognition, believing that if enough people admire them, they will feel important. But no matter how much they achieve, the emptiness remains. Frankl argued that this was because meaning is not something external. It is not something we can buy, earn, or collect. Meaning must come from within. It is about how we choose to see the world and what we decide to do with our time and energy. One of the biggest mistakes people make is believing that life is supposed to give them meaning. They wait for meaning to come to them, as if it will arrive one day like a gift. But Frankl taught that life does not owe us meaning. Instead, life asks us to create meaning. It is not about what we can take from life, but about what we can give to it. He often used the example of responsibility. When people feel responsible for something or someone, they naturally feel a sense of purpose. A doctor feels meaning in treating a patient. A teacher feels meaning in helping students learn. A parent finds meaning in raising a child. Even in small acts, helping a friend, creating something beautiful, doing good work. There is meaning, but meaning is not always easy to find. Frankl believed that many people avoid searching for meaning because it requires effort. It requires looking deeply at life and asking hard questions. What is truly important to me? What kind of person do I want to be? What do I want to give to the world? Sometimes, meaning is found in unexpected places. Frankl shared a story about a man who had been deeply depressed. The man had lost his wife and felt that life was pointless without her. He could not imagine going on. Instead of telling the man to move on or stay positive, Frankl asked him a question. If your wife were alive, how would she feel if she saw you like this? The man thought for a long time. He finally said, "She would want me to live. She would not want me to suffer like this." At that moment, something changed in him. He realized that his suffering had meaning. His love for his wife still existed, even though she was gone. He decided that he would honor her by continuing to live, by finding ways to help others. His pain did not disappear, but it became something more than just suffering. It became part of a larger purpose. Frankl believed that suffering was one of the most powerful ways to find meaning. Of course, no one wants to suffer, but suffering is a part of life, and when it comes, we have a choice. We can let it destroy us, or we can transform it into something meaningful. He saw this even in the concentration camps. Some prisoners, despite their suffering, found ways to help others. They shared their last piece of bread. They comforted those who were weaker. They kept their dignity even when everything else was taken from them. These people showed that even in the worst conditions, a person could choose how to respond. This is what Frankl called the last human freedom, the ability to choose our attitude in any situation. No matter what happens to us, we still have control over how we react. We can give up or we can decide to keep going. In modern life, suffering comes in different forms. Some people experience great loss, like losing a loved one or facing a serious illness. Others struggle with loneliness, failure, or disappointment. But no matter what the struggle is, meaning can be found. For some, suffering gives them the ability to help others. A person who has overcome depression can help others going through the same battle. Someone who has lost a loved one may be able to support others in grief. Pain can become a bridge that connects us to others. For others, suffering becomes a way to grow stronger. When we face difficulties, we develop patience, courage, and wisdom. We learn things about ourselves that we never knew before. We discover what truly matters. Frankl's lesson was that meaning is not something we find only in good times. It is something we can create even in the hardest moments. And when we find meaning, we find the strength to keep going. Frankl's message is clear. Life is not just about avoiding suffering or chasing happiness. It is about finding a deep and personal meaning that makes every experience, both good and bad, worthwhile. He believed that the search for meaning is the most important human drive, even greater than the pursuit of pleasure or success. In today's world, many people feel lost because they focus on the wrong things. They believe that happiness comes from wealth, comfort, or status. They spend years chasing after material success, thinking it will bring them fulfillment. But often, when they finally reach their goals, they still feel empty inside. That is because happiness is not something we can chase directly. It is a byproduct of living a meaningful life. Frankl's idea of meaning is different for each person. There is no single definition of a meaningful life. For some, meaning comes from love for a partner, a child, or even humanity as a whole. For others, meaning comes from creativity, writing, painting, building, or inventing something that did not exist before. Some find meaning in knowledge, dedicating their lives to learning and teaching. And for many, meaning is found in service, helping others, making the world a better place, or simply bringing kindness into daily life. He explained that meaning is not something permanent, can change over time. A person may find meaning in their career when they are young but later find it in family or community. What gives life meaning today may not be the same thing that gives it meaning in 10 years. That is why it is important to keep searching, to keep asking ourselves, what is my purpose now? What can I give to the world today? One of the most important parts of Frankl's philosophy is that meaning is not just about great achievements. Many people believe that their life must be extraordinary to be meaningful. They think they need to become famous, invent something revolutionary, or leave behind a great legacy. But Frankl teaches that meaning can be found in the smallest moments. A kind word to a stranger, a smile to someone who is struggling, taking care of a sick loved one, doing honest work, even if no one notices. These small acts create meaning just as much as great accomplishments do. A person does not have to change the world to have a meaningful life. They just have to live with purpose, kindness, and a sense of responsibility. Frankl also believed that people have the power to change their attitude at any moment. He often spoke about tragic optimism, the idea that even in the face of tragedy, we can choose to remain hopeful. This does not mean ignoring pain or pretending that suffering does not exist. It means accepting reality while still believing that life has meaning. It means choosing to act with courage, even when life is difficult. He saw that people who had this mindset were able to survive even the worst conditions. They refused to let suffering break them. Instead, they used it as an opportunity to grow. This is what makes humans unique. Unlike animals, which live only by instinct, humans can choose their attitude. No matter what happens, we can decide how to respond. Frankl believed that meaning could be found in 3 ways: through work, through love, and through suffering. Work gives meaning when it is done with purpose. It does not have to be a big or famous job. Any work, if done with care and responsibility, can bring meaning. A teacher, a doctor, a farmer, a writer. All of these roles can be meaningful if they are done with passion. Even a simple job can have great value if it helps others and is done with dedication. Love is another powerful source of meaning. When we love someone, we find purpose in caring for them, in supporting them, in making their life better. Love does not always mean romance. It can be the love for a friend, for a child, for a community, or even for humanity itself. Love gives us a reason to keep going, even when times are hard. And finally, suffering. This is the most difficult but also the most powerful way to find meaning. No one wants to suffer, but suffering is a part of life. When we face pain, we have 2 choices. We can let it destroy us, or we can transform it into something meaningful. We can use our suffering to help others, to grow stronger, or to understand life more deeply. Frankl's own life was proof of this philosophy. He lost his family, suffered in concentration camps, and faced extreme cruelty. Yet he did not let this break him. Instead, he found meaning in his suffering. He used his experience to help others, He dedicated his life to teaching people how to find purpose. No matter their situation, his message is timeless. Even today, people struggle with emptiness, with feelings of meaninglessness, with the fear that their life has no purpose. But Frankl's ideas remind us that meaning is always there. It does not come from wealth, status, or comfort. It comes from how we choose to live. It comes from love, from work, and even from suffering. No matter what happens in life, we always have the freedom to choose our response. And in that choice, we can always find meaning. That's the end of the story. If you enjoyed the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more exciting tales. Check out our other videos and share your thoughts in the comments. Stay tuned for the next adventure. Thanks for watching.